Hey, and welcome to So Many Sequels. I'm David.
I'm Andrew.
There you go.
Hey, I'm Nikki.
And we are scrapping it together this week. Josh and Garrett are both quite sick. We'll let them tell that story if they want to next time they're able to record. But we have scrounged together a team this week for Thor: Love and Thunder, the fourth film in the technically the fourth film in the Thor franchise. And we'll get into it a bit here in a second. But Andrew, welcome back. I think it's been I think we were together for Jurassic World Dominion, but you and I we haven't talked in a couple of weeks. I've been on vacation. Then we took a week off there last week, so it's been a while. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be back, and it's good to see you all.
And then, of course, for anybody who's watching that's maybe not familiar, Nikki is my wife, and I often cite her when doing my portion of the reviews. You may have seen her in some of our other shows this year, and I just kind of needed to find. I wanted to find one other voice that we could talk to for this report for this particular show. So good to have you guys.
Cheerio.
Good to be here.
Let's. So this week we are talking about Thor: Love and Thunder, the newest film in the MCU. I don't have the number off the top of my head as to how many movies this makes in this collective shared universe, but it is the fourth solo Thor film. And I believe we worked this out the other night. I believe it's Chris Hemsworth either ninth. I think it's his ninth appearance in the MCU total, when you include his cameo in the first Doctor Strange movie. Like over all of that, I think it's 9 films for him. So I'm really interested to see what you guys thought. We're back with Taika Waititi, and some of the characters he introduced have come back. Natalie Portman returns, this time under in a very new role for her. Same character, but new role. And then we also have some of the more familiar characters that you may know as well. I want to hear first from Andrew. What did you think of Thor: Love and Thunder?
I thought it was funny, but I thought it was, I don't know, that it was just like there was just something missing, you know? Like, I thought it was good for what it was. I didn't think it was great. Thor Ragnarok, Thor Ragnarok was like, I think was like a different take for Thor. It really needed it because the first two Thors were like the more serious of the MCU. And this was like when Thor Ragnarok came out, it was like a different take of the MCU. It's like we have humor, here it is.
Mm-hmm.
This Thor Love and Thunder played way too much into that. Played way too much into that. And there was some serious story elements, but I thought some of the jokes, which were funny. I mean, the movie is funny. I'll give it that.
Mm-hmm.
Plays it goes on for way too long. It goes on. It's just me.
To follow up, I agree that I think I was wildly entertained. Like, I did enjoy myself. I laughed. I found the moments where they wanted it to be sort of emotional or or sentimental or dramatic. All of those moments did work, but you're right. I saw a TikToker say this, that Taika Waititi's part of his sort of signature storytelling style is this kind of concept of sort of ironic detachment from the emotional weight. So like and sometimes it works really well, and then sometimes it can not sit right, especially when you're used to, I think, the way that I think especially when you're used to superhero blockbuster fare being very to this point, like, super serious, or maybe not super serious, but at least serious enough that like moments have like weight. And I feel like sometimes with this movie there wasn't enough time to settle on things. It felt like it was a very jumpy, like, or moving from place to place. And I talked to Nikki about it yesterday when we saw it. Was for me, Ragnarok still feels like a movie that had Taika's influence, but also still had a lot of structure to it. And this felt like it had a little bit less structure. It felt a little bit more sort of loose and not, unfortunately, not loose enough for Taika's style to work because like I think there was still the semblance of a superhero genre film, right? And I think if Taika left to his own devices, I think the whole thing he would take Thor, he'd make the whole thing like a mockumentary type thing. I think if he had his wish. Similar to some he did these Team Thor shorts where they do that. I think he'd do the whole movie that way. It'd be a lot if he was allowed to do whatever he absolutely wanted. And I think the movie probably would be really fun that way. But it wouldn't fit into what we kind of know as a superhero movie. That said, I thought that Natalie Portman felt freer and more loose in this movie. She was very enjoyable. I thought that Chris Hemsworth, the whole movie, like I feel like it's all based around this new persona that Chris has been allowed to take on for Thor, where he's more funny, he's more charming, he's a little bit like still has that like sense of false bravado, and it just kind of I think that Chris has found a fun place for this character. I thought that Christian Bale was visually captivating, and then as a performance, you're always going to get a solid performance out of Christian Bale. You could put him in nothing. You could give him no makeup or visual effects, and he would dominate the scene. But to have this character who's just like completely solid black and white, and he has this very like skinny, gaunt look about him. He's just very interesting. Every time Christian Bale's on screen, it's really, really interesting. Yeah, but like I said, like you said, the jokes, they are good jokes. So they're funny. But sometimes for me, the structure felt a little too loose. I'm still going to give it a very high rating at the end of the day because I had a good time. But Nikki, what did you think?
I think this voice that Taika Waititi has found for Thor is the best voice that he's been given. For me, the best Thor story, and David and I talked about this on the way home yesterday after we watched it. For me, the best Thor story is his arc in Infinity War and Endgame. That is the strongest that he's ever been. I think Thor is his best when he has purpose. And in Ragnarok, he had a good purpose. In Infinity War and Endgame, he has a good purpose. He eventually found a good purpose in Love and Thunder. And like David, I'm gonna give this a pretty high rating, but I do have some criticisms. He eventually did find purpose, but the wandering aimlessly didn't work for me. In the beginning, where he's just kind of floating, and it makes sense that he would need to be floating because he has nothing. He has nothing after Endgame. So it kind of makes sense that he would be this nomad, but I felt like they just went to saying it had no structure is a really good way to put it. I think the beginning did just kind of wander too aimlessly. And David and I talked about this a lot. I'm going to rephrase something that I said to David last night that I think will hopefully gain me some more favor because he pretty radically disagreed with this thing that I said yesterday. But the biggest problem that has existed in all four Thor movies, the big problem that they have had is that he is not the most interesting character in his franchise. And Taika Waititi addressed that when he took up the realm for Ragnarok. He said, hey, hot take, Thor should be the star of his own franchise, and he's not. And I don't think we can disagree with that. He wasn't. And so I think when he took over this kind of comedy himbo, guy who just kind of nomads around and finds a place for him to be, I think that was a great choice. And it certainly is the most interesting that he's ever been. Unfortunately, even in this movie, there are moments where he is not the most interesting character on screen. Um, the 7 minutes that Zeus is in this movie dominates. Zeus steals that entire moment. Like Thor basically didn't need to be there for me. I mean, he just like Russell Crowe as Zeus was incredible. Those were a fantastic 7 minutes. Well done, Russell Crowe. Gore wiped the floor with Thor. Those are a lot of or sounds. I apologize. But Gore is easily the best villain that the Thor franchise has had. Like it's incomparable. David kind of thinks that Hela is a little better.
I don't know
I
if
think
that's
Hela
better, but I don't diminish her as much as you do.
Okay, you guys don't know this, but we like the movies that you guys will review in the podcast. We will talk about them on the way home, and like the things that he says to me versus the things he says on the podcast rarely match up, and I get so angry. And this is one of those times
you are my sounding board.
Because last night I said Gore is infinitely a better, and he was like, I don't know about that. Hela's pretty great, and now you're like,
because you said she's infinitely better, and that's like infinitely better is like that means she's a nothing basically in comparison. I don't think she's a nothing.
It doesn't mean she's nothing.
Anyway,
but she's one dimensional, and she is chaos for the sake of chaos, which can be a great villain. The Joker in The Dark Knight is chaos for the sake of chaos, and he's fantastic. Right? I know. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It does. You're right. It does. But
it doesn't matter who's doing it. Somebody's bringing up The Dark Knight one of the answers.
And it's low fruit on the tree. I apologize. I apologize. That was too easy of a reference, but I'm not wrong. Chaos for the case of chaos can be a great villain. Gore had a purpose. Gore had structure. Gore had a reason for why he was the way that he is. And I really hate when people play this card, so I apologize in advance. But as a parent, and I even told David this as we were leaving, as a parent, you cannot make me watch a person lose their child on screen and then find out their entire faith basis is meaningless and doesn't exist. You cannot expect me to watch that moment and not sympathize with them. You can't. Like, I'm going to, sorry. And I did. It doesn't make his actions right. But it does change that. So Gore is the most interesting character in this movie, and he wipes the floor with Thor. Sorry, he does. I did not walk away from this. I loved Jane's story. It is definitely the most interesting that Jane has ever been. And David and I talked about this yesterday. I don't really blame her for wanting to sit out after Thor: The Dark World, then seeing what they did in Ragnarok and go, oh, maybe I want in on this. I don't blame her at all for that being the path. But as great as the Mighty Thor was, and as interesting as that whole story is, I didn't walk away as in love with the Mighty Thor as I wanted to be. David knows this. I am a sucker for a good girl boss. You want to get a Nikki, you give her a good girl boss. I am all about Captain Marvel. I am all about Wanda. I am all about. I like Black Widow. I have issues, but she's great. I love me a good girl boss. So I was fully expecting to totally be all about the Mighty Thor, and I'm not as in love with her as I wanted to be. So I kind of mirror what everybody else says. The humor is nice. I think the reason that people have issue with the humor is because it doesn't look like a superhero movie. That's not, this is not your typical superhero movie, and that's not what it looks like. And a lot of it did work for me. Did it go too far? Yes, I agree. And my last big criticism that I want to say, and I told David this last night, and he agrees with me. He agrees with me, but at the same time, no, he doesn't. If you watch this movie and still don't think that Taika Waititi's ego is entirely too large, nothing is going to convince you. Um, there was entirely too much Korg in this movie, entirely too much. Um, I didn't need him as the narrator. I didn't need him in every single moment that he was in. Uh, I didn't need that much Korg. So
Yeah, I think less would have I think less Korg would have been better
yeah.
for me.
I also there are also a lot of moments in this movie that are really unearned. Um, for it's weird for Thor to say he's never belonged anywhere when he's had the Lady Sif and the Warriors 3, he's had the Avengers, he's had the Revengers, and now he's got, the group that he kind of makes in this, where he keeps finding these families and then losing them, which they, took away his purpose again. I'm kind of getting tired of them taking away Thor's purpose. Like I
I don't
kind of
really know. I don't really know what that means. But yeah, I mean, I feel like the story of this movie is Thor finding purpose again. Like
then they take it away. And
that's
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 the
the whole
purpose of
goal,
finding love. He finds
right?
love in this again. He gets that reconnection and then they kill her. They take it away. I just like that.
Yeah, but he finds it in a new way. We won't get into spoilers more later, or maybe we won't at all. Maybe we'll keep it vague on spoilers. But
I
I
just
want
gave
to
a
say, in refutation to your thing about interesting, other characters are supposed to be interesting. This is a debate we have often about specifically Thor, but like Thor doesn't need to be the most interesting character in every scene of the movie. Other characters should have their scenes to that they get to dominate, and Thor should have his scenes where he gets to dominate. That's just good writing, I think, because if only one character for the whole movie is the most interesting character, then all the other characters are superfluous. It doesn't matter if they're there at all.
I didn't
So
say
those
that.
other characters need to be interesting and they need to have their moment. But I'll say this, like, as interesting as Zeus was, the second that spoiler alert, the second that Thor and Jane and all them started, rebelling, that's when they were like, okay, we're taking the scene back now. Like that's like they all of a sudden became more interesting again, if that's how you want to look at it.
But there's a
So
difference.
Andrew, I want to ask you.
Yeah. I just
Oh, go
there's
ahead.
a difference. There's a difference between letting characters be interesting and them completely running the show. And that was the problem with the first
No,
first
there's not.
two Thor movies. Yes, there is, because even Taika Waititi said Thor's not the star of his own franchise, and he wasn't. And so that was a
No,
thing
and
for
that has more to do. That has that has honestly more to do with marketing and has more to do with fan reaction than it does how those films are structured. You can't help the fact that Thor is the main character of the first Thor movie, but all of these people decided they just loved Loki. That's just fan reaction, and then in Thor: The Dark World, them giving into that fan reaction. I think that you have to have, for the film to work, you have to have the character who's the main character needs to be quiet sometimes so that the other characters can speak and do their thing, and then that character can respond. Andrew, Andrew, what do you think? Do you like this direction for Thor that we've been on?
Okay. So I think in the beginning it was fine. It was good. Like it was just like, oh, okay. Um, but now I'm thinking like there needs to be something deeper to Thor. There needs to be something like a deeper connection for Thor because right now I know like his girlfriend comes back. His girlfriend comes back and she's kind of a main plot point of this, but this movie doesn't really focus on that. Not really. I don't think it does because
No,
like
it doesn't give enough time to it.
no,
yeah.
and it also doesn't give enough time for Gore either. Like I wanted to know more about Gore because I
Mhm.
thought he could be an interesting character. And a lot of props to Christian Bale. Like because Christian Bale did this at the request of his kids.
Mm.
And
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah, he did this at the request of his kids.
I love
And
Christian Bale.
and
He's
he
actually do it.
because he didn't want to be because like after the Dark Knight, he said, I don't want to be in any more comic book franchise movies. But he did this because his kids wanted to. Um, but the thing is that like he does a great job. Like he's very mesmerizing. and his whole demeanor throughout from the time you see him to up until later on in the film, he does great, but I would like to know a little bit more about him. And we just don't get that. I
Yeah.
feel like this movie was just very all over the place, and I think it was focused way too much on
Yeah.
the humor. I also think this is something that I've been thinking ever since I saw it. It's the exact same movie as Thor Ragnarok. It's like Thor Ragnarok 2.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah. David and I had a conversation about that last night. This
That's
idea
a
of
confusing
like,
statement.
well, we had a conversation last night after we saw it about this idea of like a film finding a voice that works, and then just running it into the ground in the sequel. Um, we talked about, in my opinion, and he kind of
There-
agreed with me. Deadpool versus Deadpool 2 is an example of that, where it worked great in the first one, and then they just took it and ran it into the ground in the sequel. I don't know that this is as bad as that one. But I don't disagree with you, Andrew.
Well,
I think you make a valid point.
Thank you.
well, I mean, it is Thor Ragnarok too, because it's the same director, and it's obviously a sequel to that movie. But anyway, no, yeah, we did talk about doubling down on a style, and sometimes doubling down on a particular style works, and sometimes it doesn't. I think Andrew, you might agree with me on this. And I mentioned this one to Nikki last night. The John Wick series, right?
Yeah.
That first John Wick came out, right? Everybody's like, "Wow, that's pretty cool." Then in the sequel, they just double down on all of it. The fight choreography gets longer and more in depth. The level of punishment that Keanu Reeves goes through is more intense, right?
Yeah.
And then John Wick 3 comes along and they just triple down on it. It's even more extreme, even more crazy. There's wilder fight scenes and deaths and all that, right? Super long one take shots, fight scenes. And that's a franchise where it's working.
Yeah.
And then there are franchises where that style, like Lord of the Rings, it works. But there are sometimes it's like, sometimes doubling down on a style just makes it feel repetitive and uninteresting. I don't know what sometimes, and I don't know why it works versus sometimes when it doesn't work. I think that for whatever reason, The Matrix didn't work in that way, in that case. Like, it just felt like the sequels in a lot of ways didn't do anything new while doing too much, like all at once. I don't know. Maybe that's a bad comparison, but
No.
I think
I
Yeah.
agree with you, because like that's a good point. Thor Thor Ragnarok was like a different turn for Thor, because
right.
and now like we have Thor Love and Thunder. While still a very entertaining movie, it really doesn't do anything. It doesn't.
Yeah, it doesn't.
It doesn't.
It doesn't.
It's just like what you said just a second ago about the Matrix. Uh, the Matrix, like the Matrix Reloaded and the Matrix Revolutions, do nothing. There's no reason to them. And I
Doesn't
think,
feel like there is anyway.
yeah, I mean, like Love and
They
Thunder.
double.
The only thing really
Yeah.
Love and Thunder. Sorry, David. The only thing that Love and Thunder really do is that it wraps up some of the other arcs while creating a couple of new ones. I thought the scene where all were like Zeus and like all the other gods were there. I thought that was cool. I'm glad they touched base on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought there could have been a little more involvement, but anyway,
But
I've said
it's
my
one of
piece.
it's this complicated thing, which Andrew, I don't know how much time we have, but I think we're
9
getting
minutes
towards
left.
Okay.
okay. Well, I'll get into box office here. I will. My last thought on it is it's very hard, because we'll get into our ratings and stuff too. It's very hard to sort of like come to terms with these things, because it's like you want to break it down on like a very like intense level and how it all connects to previous films and how it compares to this film and that film and things like that. But at the same time, you're also just like, but I had fun. Like if this wasn't a movie, if this wasn't connected to anything, I would have just said, wow, that was kind of a blast and fun. It was a little
Yeah.
weird, not, maybe not a perfect movie, but I had fun.
Yeah.
So box office stats, I'm going to keep it brief. We'll get into that real quick. So Thor: Love and Thunder opens the weekend of July 7th. And on opening day, the number that I'm seeing cited here is $69 million opening day, which is very good in comparison to other recent films. The Batman did about 56 million. I think Top Gun Maverick did 53 million. The most recent MCU movie, Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness, that did 90 million on its first day. So not quite as big as that, but still obviously in the top 5 of the year for opening day. And then opening weekend, these numbers are still estimates, but it's looking at about 143 million opening weekend, which is, again, not as good as Doctor Strange for your opening weekend, and most likely won't have the legs of a Top Gun Maverick, which is just killing it at the box office. But it is very fun because when you look at Thor as a franchise, it's one of the few times I should do like a special video about this, but Thor: Love and Thunder and the Thor franchise is one of the few examples of a franchise where the box office draw gets better with each movie. So Thor, the very first Thor, opened to $65 million opening weekend. Thor: The Dark World, 85 million. And then Thor Ragnarok opened to 120. And this opens to estimates say 142. So each movie better than the last in terms of its draw, in terms of its interest. They have taken Thor for being a character nobody thought would be interesting or worth seeing, and they have built him into a legitimate movie star, or like a movie character, which I think is fascinating. It's really cool. I don't know when we're going to see Chris Hemsworth depart from this mega franchise the way Chris Evans has and Robert Downey Jr. has. But as sort of the third guy in that trinity, if you will, I really hope Chris Hemsworth continues to be a big star after this is over. What do you guys think about that?
I don't know. Like, I think I really do think that maybe they need to beef it up for the next one. Like,
Mhm.
and I hate to say that because like I don't know where they could go with it, but like, yeah, I I hope they rethink it for a couple of years.
Me too. So Andrew, would you do me a favor? Can you pull up the letterbox score? I think we'll forego the game this week, but I am interested to see early on where it's kind of falling.
Okay,
I can't pull it up right here. My computer's down.
I got you.
I'm concerned as far as where things go for the future. I'm concerned that they have written themselves into a corner, especially with the way that the ending happened with giving Thor Gore's daughter. Which again is a very unearned moment for me that I still just, I really, I grapple. I have issues with the ending. The ending doesn't work for me, and I'm worried that as
Yeah.
far as where do we see Thor go from here, I really
I feel like
a
Well,
corner.
I don't think they've written themselves into a corner. I think it's like they have so many options. They have a lot of ways they can go with it. I don't know what they'll go with. I don't know what they'll pick. Like the thing is, I don't have the mindset I don't know where their plans are. Obviously, based on the post credit scenes, we have an adversary for the war on the horizon, which we've already talked about some spoilers, but I'll put up one more spoiler warning here. Ted Lasso's Brett Goldstein, aka Roy Kent, debuts at the end of this movie as Hercules. So there's an avenue where you might have those two meeting up in the future. We also see Jane Foster enter Valhalla. So it'll be interesting to see how they want to use that, if that's just a throwaway or if they're going to do something with that. Andrew, do you have a letterbox score?
I do have a letterbox score.
Where is Thor: Love and Thunder right now?
Okay, so Thor: Love and Thunder, based on 221 ratings, currently sits at 3.3. Which I
Okay,
think is
that's lower than I
3.3.
would guess.
Okay.
So
yeah, that was lower than I thought.
my guess was 3.8.
Personally, personally going to give it 4 stars because I did wildly enjoy myself. It's not a perfect movie, but I honestly feel like it's going to be very rewatchable just because of how fun it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is that thing I'm talking about. He gave it 4.5 last night.
Well, I've dropped it down.
Okay.
I would give this a solid 3.
I was pretty set on it being a 3.5 for at least half the movie. I was like, this is a 3.5. This is a 3.5.
Yeah.
But when they really let Gore just let loose and unleash, specifically the call the axe moment.
Yeah.
When he's got them trapped in and he's trying to get Thor to call the axe, that made it a 4-star moment for me. I clearly have a lot of criticisms with the movie. It's, it's not perfect, but the moments that work too well for me to give it any lower than a 4.
All right. Well,
Uh,
that is. Oh, sorry, Andrew. Go ahead.
I just want to point one thing out.
Go ahead.
The Guardians of the Galaxy. Nope.
I was about to say we don't mention them. Yeah. Well, I told
Guardians of the
David.
Galaxy. They were
I
just
told
there, and then they were gone.
Yeah.
They were. Yeah, they were. It was a fun inclusion at the beginning, and that's kind of what I anticipated was they were just going to be a short cameo in the beginning, and then they were going to jet off. That's kind of how I pictured it for a long time. Interestingly, though, I think I told Nikki this last night. I always thought that it would be Guardians of the Galaxy 3 with a brief cameo from Thor based off at, like the ending of Endgame, they go off together. I always thought it was going to be Guardians 3 with Thor, but then it became Thor 4 with the Guardians. So, yeah, that's how I always envisioned it was they were going to be there for a while and then they were going to, hit the road. But he should have called them back, right? He should have said, "Hey, I need help."
Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't what I was hoping it would be. We've had 3 years of sitting on, oh man, Thor and the Guardians. That's going to be so cool. And I talked about this last night with David. I kind of think that's my fault. I kind of suffered from letting it build up in my head and thinking it was going to be something really cool, especially when we have, all these MCU movies that have all these crossovers in them, which I very adamantly have told David, I think from here on out, every MCU movie should have at least some level of crossover like that. I don't think there's reason not to. I think it keeps that connection going of this, especially while we don't know where the MCU is going. I'm sorry. Especially while we don't know where the MCU is going, I think these crossovers are a great way to keep the universe connected. The Guardians didn't do what I was hoping they would do. It didn't work the way that I was hoping it would work. I don't know how to fix it. We don't have time to talk about how to fix it. But I will say that was kind of a letdown for me, was getting to see the Guardians.
Yep, not for me. It was this has been our review of Thor: Love and Thunder. Hopefully we can get Josh and Garrett back on. They can give their thoughts at some point. Maybe down the line, maybe during our mid-year review at some point. But subscribe, follow So Many Sequels. We're on Apple, Spotify, all those different places. We will see you next time. Not really sure what our next movie is going to be, but stick around. And Andrew, hope to have you back soon.